Have you ever noticed that one colleague? The one who was a rising star, the person everyone expected to be the next vice president, who suddenly just stopped. They didn't have a breakdown. They didn't storm out in a fit of rage. They just walked into the manager's office, handed in a resignation, and disappeared into a life that looks, by all modern standards, much smaller. They traded the corner office for a backyard garden. They traded the luxury SUV for a bicycle and a library card. To the outside world, it looks like they gave up. It looks like they lost their edge, like they couldn't handle the heat, or like they simply ran out of steam. But what if I told you that from a biological perspective, they didn't give up at all? What if what looks like a retreat is actually a sophisticated neurological recalibration? What if leaving your career isn't a sign of weakness, but a high-level brainpower move that most people are simply too biologically compromised to make? Stay with me, because we are about to look into the neurobiology of the exit. We're going to explore why your brain is currently trapped in a cycle of diminishing returns and why the most intelligent thing you can do for your long-term survival might be the very thing your social circle calls failure. To understand why walking away is a power move, we first have to understand why we stay in the middle-class trap to begin with. Your brain was never designed for the modern workplace. It was designed for the savannah. For 300,000 years, survival was tied to two things: resource accumulation and social standing. In a tribal setting, if you had more food, you lived. If you had higher status, you were protected. Your brain evolved a specific piece of hardware to ensure you never stopped seeking these things. It's called the ventral striatum, and it is the heart of your reward system. When you get a raise, when you see your bank balance grow, or when you get a new title on your business card, your ventral striatum floods your system with dopamine. This isn't just a feel-good chemical, it's a survival signal. It tells your brain, this is working. Keep doing this. Gain more. Climb higher. Modern wealth creation has essentially hacked this ancient survival mechanism. The corporate ladder is a perfectly engineered dopamine delivery system. The problem is that dopamine is a molecule of pursuit, not a molecule of satisfaction. It is designed to make you want more, not to make you enjoy what you have. This leads us to a phenomenon known as the hedonic treadmill. Research from Harvard and various neurological institutes has shown that as we acquire more wealth and status, our baseline for enough shifts. Your brain effectively resets to zero every time you hit a milestone. That six-figure salary that felt like a dream 5 years ago now feels like the bare minimum just to survive. This isn't because you're greedy. It's because your brain has undergone a process of receptor downregulation. You need a bigger hit of success just to feel the same level of safety you felt before. But here is where the neurobiology gets dark. While you are chasing that next dopamine hit to stay ahead of the middle-class trap, another part of your brain is paying the price. Your amygdala, the almond-shaped cluster responsible for your fight-or-flight response, is being constantly overstimulated. In the wild, a stress response lasted minutes. You ran from the predator, or you died. In the modern career, the predator never leaves. The predator is the 9 p.m. email. The predator is the quarterly performance review. The predator is the constant nagging fear of being replaced by someone younger, faster, or cheaper. When your brain is under chronic stress, it produces a flood of cortisol. In small doses, cortisol is helpful. In the long term, it is neurotoxic. High levels of cortisol literally shrink the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function, logic, and long-term planning. It also weakens the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. This means that the more successful you become in a high-stress environment, the less capable your brain becomes of making rational, long-term decisions about your own well-being. You become more reactive, more anxious, and more dependent on the very system that is breaking you down. This is the middle-class trap in its most literal biological form. You are working harder to earn more money to pay for a lifestyle that you are increasingly too stressed to enjoy, while your brain's ability to imagine an alternative is being physically eroded. You aren't just stuck in a job, you are stuck in a feedback loop of survival chemistry that tells you that stopping is death. So, why do some people walk away? Why do they give up? The people who successfully exit the race often exhibit a unique neurological profile. They have developed what scientists call cognitive flexibility. While most people's brains are stuck in a rigid pattern of seeking external validation and resource hoarding, the exiter has managed to shift the seat of their reward system. They have moved from a dopamine-driven life of pursuit to a serotonin-driven life of presence. Serotonin is the chemical of here and now. It is the neurotransmitter of satisfaction, community, and calm. When you prioritize financial freedom over luxury or time over status, you are essentially training your brain to value serotonin over dopamine. You are telling your nervous system that safety doesn't come from the next promotion, but from the stability of the present moment. But making this shift is not as simple as just deciding to quit. It is a biological battle. When you think about leaving your career, your brain's error detection system, the anterior cingulate cortex, goes into overdrive. It signals that something is wrong. It warns you that you are violating the social contract. It tells you that if you stop climbing, you will lose your place in the tribe. This is why the prospect of giving up feels so much like literal, physical pain. The brain power move isn't the act of quitting itself. The power move is the neurological strength required to override those ancient panicked survival signals. It is the ability of the prefrontal cortex to look at the data and say, the current path is leading to biological bankruptcy. I am choosing a different metric of success. Most people think that retirement or financial freedom is about having enough money to do nothing. But the neurobiology of a successful exit tells a different story. It's about having the cognitive resources to do what actually matters. When you remove the constant noise of corporate competition and financial anxiety, your brain undergoes a process of neural pruning. It stops wasting energy on status seeking and starts reallocating that energy toward creativity, deep relationships, and physical health. We see this in the brains of people who have moved into slow living or unconventional careers. Their heart rate variability improves. Their sleep architecture becomes more robust. Their inflammatory markers drop. They aren't giving up on life. They are finally giving their biology a chance to function as it was intended. But there is a specific trap within the escape itself. Many people think they can buy their way out of the rat race without changing their brain. They think that if they just hit a certain number in their investment account, the anxiety will disappear. But if you haven't addressed the neurobiology of your pursuit, you will simply take that same stressed, dopamine-addicted brain into your freedom. You will find new things to worry about. You will find new ways to compare yourself to others. You will turn your hobbies into a competition. The real power move is the internal exit. It is the moment you realize that the rat race isn't a building you work in or a city you live in. It is a state of neurological arousal. It is a belief that your value is tied to your output. To truly escape, you have to do more than just change your job. You have to change what your brain considers a win. In the next part of this exploration, we're going to look at the specific psychological hurdles that make this transition so difficult. We're going to talk about the identity death that occurs when you lose your professional title and why your social circle will likely try to pull you back into the race. We will look at how the middle class is conditioned to fear the very freedom they claim to want, and how you can prepare your nervous system for the shock of actually being in control of your own time. Because the truth is, the world doesn't want you to exit. The economy relies on your dissatisfaction. It relies on your brain staying in that state of chronic pursuit. When you decide to stop, you are becoming a glitch in the system, and that glitch is where your real life begins. The neurobiology of giving up is actually the neurobiology of waking up. It's about recognizing that the ladder you've been climbing is leaning against a wall that doesn't lead anywhere you actually want to go. If you feel that pull, that quiet, persistent voice telling you that there has to be more to life than the next performance review, don't dismiss it as laziness. Don't call it a midlife crisis. That voice is your prefrontal cortex trying to save your life. It's your biology telling you that the trade-off has become too expensive. We've been taught that the people who stay until the end, who grind until they break, are the heroes. But as we look deeper into the way our brains actually work, we might find that the real heroes are the ones who had the courage to look at the win and realize it was actually a loss. They are the ones who saw the trap for what it was and decided that the only way to win the game was to stop playing it by everyone else's rules. This is part one of the neurobiology of giving up. We have laid the groundwork of the biological trap. Now, we must look at how to dismantle it. Because once you understand the chemistry of your own ambition, you can no longer be a slave to it. You start to see the rat race for what it truly is, a biological misunderstanding. And once you see it, you can finally start to plan your escape. Not because you're tired, but because you're finally thinking clearly. Not because you've given up, but because you've decided to finally start winning a game that actually matters. The hardest part of any escape isn't the physical act of leaving. It's the psychological fallout of the identity death that follows. When you spend 10, 15, or 20 years building a career, your brain doesn't just see that as a job. It sees it as a fundamental part of your self-concept. In the world of neurobiology, we call this the self-schema. Your prefrontal cortex has woven your professional title, your salary, and your daily responsibilities into a narrative of who you are. When you decide to give up that career, you aren't just losing an income. You are effectively killing off a version of yourself. This is why so many people, even those with significant financial freedom, find themselves unable to walk away. They are terrified of the void. If you aren't a senior manager or a director or a business owner, then who are you? Research in social psychology has shown that career-related identity loss triggers the same neural pathways as physical grief. When you step away from the latter, your brain's limbic system perceives it as a social death. You are losing your place in the hierarchy, and for a social primate, that is a biological emergency. This social pressure is the second major hurdle of the middle-class trap. Your brain is hyper-attuned to the opinions of the tribe. We have evolved to mirror the values of those around us because, for thousands of years, being different meant being exiled. Today, that instinct manifests as social comparison anxiety. When you tell your friends or family that you're leaving a high-paying career to pursue a simpler life, you will likely be met with concern that feels like judgment. They will ask if you're okay. They will wonder if you've had a breakdown. But here is the hidden reality. Their reaction isn't actually about you. It's an immune response from the collective. By leaving the race, you are unintentionally highlighting the fact that the race is optional. You are a living reminder that the stress they endure every day might not be necessary. To protect their own psychological stability, they need to frame your exit as a failure or a crisis. Understanding this neurobiological mirroring is essential. If you don't realize that their judgment is a reflection of their own fear, you will let their anxiety pull you back into the trap. This brings us to the middle-class safety paradox. Most people stay in the race because they are chasing a feeling of security. They believe that if they just have a little more money, a slightly better title, or a more robust retirement plan, the underlying sense of dread will go away. But neurobiologically, the opposite often happens. The more you have to lose, the more active your amygdala becomes. You begin to suffer from loss aversion, a cognitive bias where the pain of losing what you have is twice as powerful as the joy of gaining something new. The middle-class trap is built on this fear. You become a prisoner of your own lifestyle. You buy a house that requires a high salary, which requires long hours, which causes stress, which leads you to buy things to relieve that stress, which further increases your overhead. This is a state of functional freezing. You aren't happy, but you are too afraid of the potential loss to move. The power move, the true brain power move, is recognizing that this security is a neurological illusion. True security isn't found in the accumulation of resources, but in the reduction of your dependency on those resources. When you decide to exit, you are performing a voluntary downshift. From a brain perspective, this is a massive exercise in inhibitory control. You are training your brain to say no to the immediate dopamine hit of a purchase or a status symbol in favor of the long-term serotonin of autonomy. This is incredibly taxing on your cognitive reserves. It's why so many people give up on their exit and return to the grind. They run out of the mental energy required to swim against the current of societal expectations. To survive this transition, you have to understand the dopamine to meaning shift. In the career world, your goals are external and measurable. You know if you're winning because the numbers go up. When you exit, the scoreboard disappears. For a brain that has been trained for decades to chase measurable growth, this lack of feedback can feel like a depression. You might find yourself wandering through your newly freed days feeling aimless or even guilty. This guilt is a byproduct of the Protestant work ethic that has been hard-coded into our cultural psyche and, by extension, our neural pathways. Your brain has been conditioned to associate rest with laziness and production with worth. To overcome this, you have to consciously build new reward circuits. You have to learn to find deep neurological satisfaction in non-productive activities. This could be the flow state found in a hobby, the oxytocin release of deep conversation, or the simple peace of a quiet morning. If you don't intentionally rewire your reward system, you will simply recreate the rat race in your personal life. You'll start optimizing your sleep, tracking your meditation, and gamifying your fitness. You'll still be a slave to the dopamine loop. You'll just be wearing different clothes. The real exit is the ability to exist without the need for constant, measurable progress. Furthermore, we have to address the financial fear circuit. Money is one of the most powerful triggers for the human brain. It represents survival, freedom, and power. When you choose to earn less, even if you have enough, your brain's survival centers will scream at you. This is why financial freedom isn't a number. It's a psychological state. There are people with $10 million who feel poor, and people with 50,000 who feel wealthy. The difference lies in the locus of control. Most people in the middle-class trap have an external locus of control. Their sense of well-being is dependent on their employer, the stock market, or the economy. When you exit, you are forced to develop an internal locus of control. You have to become the source of your own validation and security. This is a profound neurological shift. It moves you from a state of learned helplessness, where you feel you must endure the grind to survive, to a state of agency. This agency is the ultimate brain power move. It is the realization that you are the architect of your own experience. When you leave a high-powered career for a simpler life, you aren't settling. You are choosing to reallocate your most precious biological resource, your attention. In the rat race, your attention is sold to the highest bidder. It is fragmented by emails, meetings, and constant demands. When you exit, you buy your attention back. Think about the sheer cognitive energy it takes to manage a high-level career. The constant switching between tasks, the political maneuvering, the long-term strategic thinking, the emotional regulation required to deal with difficult people. When you give up, you are reclaiming that energy. You are taking all that processing power and pointing it toward your own life, your own family, and your own health. This is why exiters often experience a surge in creativity and problem-solving ability after the initial shock of the transition wears off. Their brains are no longer in a state of perpetual crouch, waiting for the next blow. They move into a broaden and build state, where they can see connections and possibilities that were invisible to them when they were stressed. However, you must be prepared for the void phase. This is the period after the excitement of quitting has faded, but before the new life has taken root. It's a period of profound uncertainty where the brain's predictive processing goes haywire. Your brain loves to predict the future, and when you've stripped away the old routine, it can no longer predict what your day, your year, or your life will look like. This can lead to a sense of existential dread. Most people run back to the race during the void phase. They mistake the discomfort of transition for a sign that they made a mistake. But if you understand the neurobiology, you know that this discomfort is actually the feeling of your brain rewiring itself. It is the feeling of old, useless neural pathways being pruned away to make room for something new. It is the neurological equivalent of a forest fire. It looks like destruction, but it is actually clearing the ground for more robust growth. As you move through this, you start to realize that the giving up was never about the job. It was about giving up the illusion of control. It was about giving up the need to be somebody in the eyes of a society that doesn't actually care about your well-being. It was about giving up the middle-class trap of believing that the next purchase would finally be the one that makes you feel safe. In Part 3, we are going to look at the practical re-entry into life. How do you design a day that actually fulfills your biological needs? How do you maintain your freedom when the world tries to pull you back in? And finally, how do you know if you've actually succeeded in the ultimate power move? We are going to explore the concept of optimal living and why the most successful people of the future won't be the ones with the most money, but the ones with the most time. The exit is a journey from a dopamine-driven life of more to a serotonin-driven life of enough. It is a move from survival to flourishing. And while it might look like you're leaving the game, you're actually just starting to play the one that matters. Once you have navigated the identity death and survived the void phase, you enter the final and most critical stage of the brain power move, the design of a serotonin-based reality. This is where you stop being a passenger in a system designed by others and become the lead architect of your own neurological environment. In the corporate world, your environment is engineered to keep you in a state of high arousal vigilance. The open-plan offices, the pings of notifications, and the rigid schedules are all designed to maximize output, often at the expense of your prefrontal cortex's health. When you exit, you finally have the power to optimize for a different metric, biological harmony. The first step in this design is reclaiming your relationship with time. In the middle-class trap, time is viewed as a scarce resource to be spent or managed. This creates a chronic sense of time pressure, which elevates cortisol and narrows your cognitive focus. When you move into a life of financial freedom or intentional downshifting, you must transition from chronos, chronological ticking time, to kairos, the qualitative experience of time. Research shows that when humans feel they have time affluence, their prosocial behaviors increase, their creativity flourishes, and their systemic inflammation markers decrease. This isn't just a lifestyle change, it's a medical intervention for your nervous system. A key part of this re-entry is the mastery of your internal reward schedule. In your old career, your rewards were external and delayed. The monthly paycheck, the annual bonus, the 5-year promotion. To maintain a brain power move, you must shift to internal immediate rewards. This involves finding microflow states in everyday tasks. Whether it's the focused effort of cooking a meal from scratch, the physical feedback of gardening, or the intellectual challenge of learning a new language, these activities provide a steady stream of healthy dopamine that doesn't lead to a crash. You are teaching your brain to enjoy the process rather than the prize. However, the world will not make this easy for you. We live in an attention economy that views your newfound time as a vacuum to be filled. You will find yourself bombarded with new opportunities that look suspiciously like the old ones. A former colleague will reach out with a low-stress consulting gig. A friend will suggest a business venture that only takes 5 hours a week. These are tests of your neurological boundaries. Your brain's ancient resource hoarding instinct will try to convince you to say yes, whispering that you might need the extra money just in case. The true power move is the ability to say no to more money when you already have enough. This requires a highly developed interoceptive awareness, the ability to feel the physical sensations in your body when you consider a choice. If the thought of that consulting gig makes your chest tighten or your breath shallow, that is your nervous system telling you that the cost is too high. In the rat race, we are trained to ignore these signals. In the life after the race, these signals are your only true compass. Furthermore, we must address the social reintegration of the exiter. Once you have stepped off the treadmill, you may find that your old social circles feel increasingly alien. The conversations about workplace politics, the complaining about the grind, and the constant talk of expensive acquisitions will no longer resonate with you. This can lead to a period of social isolation, but this is actually a necessary phase of tribal realignment. You are making room for new relationships built on shared values rather than shared misery. You will start to find other quiet exiters, people who value presence over performance. These connections are governed by oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which provides a much more stable sense of well-being than the competitive dopamine of professional networking. As you settle into this new life, you will notice a profound change in your predictive processing. Your brain will stop scanning the horizon for threats and start looking for beauty and connection. You'll notice the way the light changes in your home throughout the day. You'll find yourself genuinely listening to people without thinking about what you need to do next. You will experience what psychologists call self-actualization, the state where you are finally using your unique talents and energy for their own sake, rather than for survival or status. The neurobiology of giving up ultimately reveals a radical truth. The most successful version of you is the one that doesn't need to win anymore. When you leave the career trap, you aren't walking away from your potential. You are finally reaching it. You are freeing your brain from the survival-only mode and allowing it to move into flourishing mode. You are reclaiming the 300,000 years of evolutionary wisdom that says a good life is built on community, autonomy, and a deep connection to the present moment. The middle-class trap tells you that you are a machine that needs to be optimized for revenue. The exit tells you that you are a biological organism that needs to be nurtured for meaning. By choosing to give up, you are actually choosing to stand up. You are declaring that your life is not a commodity to be traded for a bigger house or a fancier title. You are choosing the brain power move of a lifetime, the choice to be satisfied. If you are standing on the edge of this decision, feeling the weight of the rat race and the fear of the unknown, remember this: your brain is more resilient than the system that currently employs it. The anxiety you feel is not a warning to stay. It's a signal that you are already halfway out the door. The courage to leave is the courage to trust your own biology over a cultural script that is making you sick. The exit is quiet. It isn't a headline. It isn't a viral post. It's a series of small, intentional choices to value your time, your health, and your peace over everything else. And once you make that shift, you'll realize that the rat race wasn't something you were in, it was something you were doing to yourself. When you stop doing it, the race ends. And that is where your real life begins. You aren't lazy. You aren't failing. You aren't missing out. You are simply playing a different game. A game where the rules are yours, the pace is natural, and the prize is the one thing money can never truly buy. The feeling of being home in your own life. This is the ultimate neurobiological win. This is the power move, and it has been waiting for you all along.